This is Liquidity Talks Live, the destination for updates, opinions and insights from the world of treasury, liquidity and risk. Join our host, Planix CEO and founder Neville Roberts, and our industry expert guest as we power up the liquidity conversation.
Welcome to the latest instalment of Planix's Liquidity Talks live streaming podcast, Season 5, Episode 3. Now, I'm Pete McIntyre, and the very observant who you will recognise, I'm not the usual host, Neville, whose face appeared a moment ago. As you know, Liverpool is Neville's passion. He talks about them a lot on these podcasts. They were knocked out last night of the Champions League by Paris Saint-Germain, so perhaps he's licking his wounds. Well, as a Manchester City fan, I'm enjoying life right now. We're building up to what could be a title decider against Arsenal on Sunday. So let's let Neville lick his wounds. I'm sure he'll be back next time. And in the meantime, I'll stand in for him. Now, if you're a time-served audience member of these activities, you may recall I was the guest on the very first Liquidity Talks way back in the day. Now I've been promoted to guest host, so things are clearly looking up for me. For those who don't already know me, I'm one of the founders of the financial services business here at Planix. I tend to spend my time out in the marketplace talking all things liquidity and especially intraday liquidity. So you may have seen me somewhere on my travels. And what I'm going to do today is to do the housekeeping, introduce our guest and get right into the conversation. So in terms of housekeeping, anyone in the audience can ask questions as we run through these next 30 minutes. Pop them on the right-hand side of your screen in the comments section. I'll try to make sure we take those questions as we go. Any we can't fit in, we'll either try and do at the end or we'll answer after the event if necessary. If you ask a question, it'd be really helpful if you can give us some context by letting us know who you are and your role, and then we can maybe bring that out in our discussions. Now, today we're going to be talking about some of the practical impacts on liquidity management and liquidity risk when a firm is using real-time rails to make and receive payments. So to do that, I'm delighted today to welcome a real expert in this area, Domenico Scaffidi. Dom, please can you introduce yourself to kick things off?
Yeah, thank you, Pete. I love your introduction, especially the football side. And so good morning, everybody. And thank you, Planix friends, for inviting me. As you said, I'm Domenico Scaffidi. I'm based in the UK, London. And I started my career in the international cooperative banks where I was leading the cross-border department. And that is where I start understanding the link between payments, data, and the other value services, the way to manage the liquidity. In other words, I was very close to the liquidity control room and to see the impact and the way the liquidity was affected. And I'm talking about many years ago. So it wasn't the time of real time, but still there were a lot of risks. Then I moved because of this, to the European Central Bank, when I've been invited to join the target working group, reviewing the functionalities from target, migrating from target to target 2. So again, moving the RTGS system, the European RTGS system to real time, adding functionalities. And finally, that is also where I'm involved now, is the Bank of England. I'm sitting in the standard advisory panel for the renewal of the new entire payment ecosystem. And we saw, I think it was April last year, the new RTGS system again going live with the new functionalities, but it's just one milestone in the entire roadmap. So many things needed to be done. So that's me, and I hope that I will be able to make you enjoy these 30 minutes, give you some ideas or that you can pick and choose in your business. So thank you.
That's really interesting, Dom, because your experience spans such a range, and a little bit like me at the beginning of my journey in this space, you were sitting down with people who they have an end of day hat on when they're thinking about liquidity management, and suddenly they're in a real-time world. In other words, payments are settling in real time and they can't just go away and come back towards the end of the day. So maybe we could start things off by, can you give us your view on essentially what breaks, what goes wrong when somebody with the end of day hat on is being asked to live in this world of real-time rails?
Yeah, I mean, this one is a great question. I think that I'd like to bring the audience to something that maybe we are not really considering. So typically for in the last 30 years, we work in the normal business hour. So starting from the canonical 7 in the morning and finishing at 5 o'clock. And I'm not talking only on the institution side, so the central bank, but every financial institutions. But now things are changing. So we are still dealing with the liquidity according to the business hour, but we have two important factors here. We are dealing with real time. Real time need real time payments 24/7, bank holiday, weekend. So maybe we have an issue that we should consider. And plus, now we are talking about some years ago, but it's still the current regulation, the Basel III intraday liquidity principles that are telling that everyone that is managing the liquidity, that they needed to keep the position of the liquidity update, concentrate every second of the business day. So on one side, we have an extension of the business hour. On the other side, a precise position. And we know there is a lot of fragmentation, but I think that we will talk later. So I believe that if we, just to set up the scene, we need to understand where we are right now. So there is a discrepancy between the operativity and the way to manage the liquidity.
And I've definitely seen that in a lot of my journeys, people who take we use the phrase sometimes, a presumed settlement. Oh, everything's going to settle that we expect today. So all I care about is at the end of today, we'll finish at zero, ignoring where they may have changed throughout the day. So I noticed, in fact, you can see behind you on the wall, there's a propeller there. I know that aviation and being a pilot is a big part of your life. And I've seen the metaphor you've used often about a control tower is needed to help understand what's going on. Can you give us your views on what is the control tower needed to be able to manage liquidity in this real-time world? What does it need to be able to tell you?
Yeah, that one is a real propeller. It's the propeller of the airplane of my maternal grandfather. So when I start flying, I was just a 3-year-old, and I was afraid because when you are flying, you are not driving a car where you can perceive a strange noise and you just park and trying to understand. Where you are flying is real time. Yeah. And this is exactly, and so thanks for raising this point. It is exactly what I experience and every pilot experience when you are flying. And I mentioned in a crowd day, sunny day, even though I'm not a commercial pilot, I do for hobby. But then there are a lot of things that you need to consider in real time. But there is another important thing, action. So being ready to act if something is going wrong. The idea of the treasury, and again, all this started with the treasury control room when I was working for the international cooperative banks. So I'm saying about managing the liquidity to more than 1,000 medium and small financial institutions. But like you said before, at the end of the day, I need to close at zero. So I needed to have everything okay on the reconciliation side. So the point of the fragmentation that I mentioned before is not going to help the control tower. So the monitor that you have when you have your liquidity affected by many events that can be securities, can be payments, can be data. I mean, it's not just payments itself. So it's a very complex world where you and we will see, for instance, in the new RTGS system in the European Central Bank, a lot of functionalities that can help the monitor, but also the action in real time when there are many events that are happening very close to each other. If you will think about the end of the day of Target 2, I think there are almost 20-25 events in the last 30 minutes. They are determined by ancillary systems, Target 2 securities, things that need to be under control, because once the day is gone, it's finished. So you have the cutoff time, and there are almost nothing you can do. So you can imagine, you can't improvise. You can't think, oh, it is, I will do what I did yesterday, or I leave the way it is. It's never working. So this is why it's important, and I like the metaphor of the control tower, to have a perfect control. And let me say one thing. Peter. In the end, it's not just the treasury. There is a deep connection with all application, solution, products that are affecting the liquidity. It's not just the treasury. It's a teamwork. So there is a huge integration that needed to be done in order to be sure that you have the perfect control.
And I often see and say this where you've got, it's almost like who will think of the liquidity manager? Who cares about the treasurer? Because the firm, whether it's a bank, a non-bank financial institution, a fintech, payment services provider, somebody comes up with a really clever idea to do something new in the marketplace, maybe offer new products. The person who has to actually live with what happens as a consequence, the people, it's a mixture of, well, who has to make sure the liquidity is in the right place to support those new products? Who are the people who are thinking about the risk aspects of it? Who are the people in operations that need to make sure the payments actually get out of the door? So given all of those stakeholders, they all need the liquidity control tower that we've been talking about. What do you think are some of the key items that need to be provided in that liquidity control tower so that all of those stakeholders we've described can do their jobs?
Yeah, I mean, I remember, I will never forget my former colleague from Barclays that used to say, I think that he's retired now, but he always told me, Dome, in the real-time payment world, when we have a problem, it's already happened, so it's too late. We need, and to your point, Peter, we needed to find a way to understand what the problem could be. So I mentioned before teamwork. Why? In the end, I mean, think about today. We are talking a lot about artificial intelligence. And I was involved, I think, 3 or 4 weeks ago in an event here in London sponsored by the government, and thinking about how we can acquire artificial intelligence mechanism or agentic to help to manage the liquidity, not only on the financial institution side, but can be also the big corporate side, because they manage a lot of liquidity and they need to have the liquidity available at the right time, at the right place. And the point is, we can't think to add a new layer, so AI, that is thinking or telling us how to use the liquidity, how to manage the liquidity. So the process needed to start at the very beginning. So if let's talk about all rails that now we have in real time. We know it is where also AI can help. We know that payments, when they are in real time, we don't have forecast. But we can understand the trend of our clients, so client segmentation, and we can offer or build. When I say we, I mean on the financial institution side or the one that is offering financial services. So thinking how to tailor services to offer a better service on the client side that finally can understand that to have the liquidity available at a cheap price and without buying liquidity in the market, without moving the liquidity days in advance that it can be expensive. So working together as a team with our client in order to build all the mechanisms that can produce the forecast for the treasury to know the money that is going to leave out or get in. And Peter, one thing that sometimes we don't think, receiving a big amount of money is not good for the treasury when it doesn't, when it's not expecting the money, because it needs to invest. So it's a big failure. It's the same way of having a shortage of liquidity. So this is why it's important to understand both directions. And it's only where the product service can help to understand the liquidity flow.
Yeah, and so and everything you've just described there ties back to where we began, which is when you move to a real-time payments world, your view on liquidity has to start with that visibility. So what's actually happening? And then all of these extra pieces we've just been talking about, like being able to forecast where you go next, like being able to come up with ideas of what you may do with a problem, whether the problem's excess liquidity more than we expected or shortage. You've got the data to be able to take some action. There's the usual phrase about you can only manage what you can measure. If you think about metrics around this world, so now we have an institution that's got its control tower working, it's got its various rails, some of which are real time, some of which are batch. What are the sorts of metrics that an organization should be thinking about to be able to test and check whether it's in control and is doing well?
Yeah, this one is the key question, because like you said, now we have the control tower, we have everything, but let's think about real-time payments and what is happening since they came into force. And we know that now in Europe are mandatory, but it's not only in Europe. So according to the regulator, so the European Payment Council, but it's a similar here in the UK, an end-to-end payments, and by the way, UK is a SEPA country, as we know. End-to-end payments should be settled in 10, 15 seconds. But we know that the average, if we think about RT1 tips, is 4 seconds. So thinking about matrix, like you said, detection, response, resolution, and operational KPIs, and AML, session screening, limits. So all things that needed to be done in, let's say, 4 seconds. How can I do this? And also thinking that it's not just the originator that is care about all these metrics, it's also the receiver. In other words, for the first time, we see that the new ecosystem need to make the same implementation to work at the same level. Because to have an end-to-end 4 seconds, we need to be sure that the originator and the receiver have the same implementation level to offer a good service. For instance, if I have a client, I'm a financial institution, my client is asking me to send a payment to someone else. And finally, I have the best implementation available in the market. I send this payment, but this payment doesn't reach the beneficiary account. My client is upset with me, not with the beneficiary bank or financial institution. Because I finally said, listen, I give you a mandate to us to send the money, but looks like that my son, my client, blah, blah, he didn't receive the money. Where is the problem? So it's also here, there is a systemic reputational risk. So metrics are very important. This is why there are several tables calling all actors around the table. And for instance, the Standard Advisory Panel is working with the public administration, corporates, dealer, and retails. So every subject that is involved in this business, so payments, to understand that everyone is, first of all, aware of the implementation phase and is doing the right steps to be at least at the same level.
And you said something then that we should just go back to, because it's quite scary, really. You said that the average instant payment in the Eurozone is looking like 4 seconds.
Yeah.
So 4 seconds, there's a lot of work that needs to take place. Could you talk a little bit about the checks or the guardrails you need to put in place before the originator bank is saying, okay, I'm going to release the payment? Because there's a lot going on in there before you can even decide to make the payment. And you've not got many seconds left by the time you started thinking about that.
Yeah, I mean, we saw a lot of interesting events in 2025, when in January, I think that the outbound real-time payments became mandatory, and then in October the inbound is the other way around. I think that is the other way.
Yeah,
around.
you had to receive first,
yes.
And then later on you had to be able to pay. Yeah,
exactly. So sorry, but it's like you said. So anyway, so they became mandatory. Now the point is, volumes are increasing. Why? Because as a citizen, European citizen, I start enjoying the fact that I can send payments in real time and they are for free. That is one. And it's another point that maybe we can touch later. Send money in another account in time almost zero, no? And so volumes are increasing. And now, how is possible to process not bulks but single payments? So I need also the technology when we are talking about 1,000 payments in literally few seconds. Now, the point, the European Payment Council at some point, I remember, suggests to perform a bulk test at the end of the day. First of all, my question, what is the end of the day?
What's the end of the day? It's 24/7, yeah.
So it means that at some point I need to stop the service. And this sometimes is happening. That is not good things to do, because it is a service that should be up and running 24/7. And if I stop the service, I lose trust. And so it's a reputational risk. The second point is, to your question, what can I do then? There are some tests that can be performed before the final timestamp, so before the payment physically go out, like limit if my client has the money in the account. If legally speaking, the two accounts, originator and beneficiary account, can are legally entitled to receive send payments. So OAM session screening. Let's say that in the last 1 or 2 minutes before sending the payment is possible to do some tests to reduce the real-time testing to the very minimum, to be sure that finally I can meet the average time in sending payments, and be sure that the payments will be in the beneficiary account at least according to the APC timeline, that is 10-15 seconds. And so again, to do this, you need implementation, innovation. And we know that we are talking to the majority of the traditional financial institutions. They have a 35, 40-year-old legacy system, so literally not built for real time. And it doesn't mean that you need to panic, think that everything needs to be done right now, otherwise I'm outside of the market. No, it's not like that. There are steps that can be done to allow some use cases to go live according to the innovation, and keeping maybe the traditional other use cases for in a roadmap where there are milestones where we are going to release. But doing something now is mandatory.
And it's interesting, often when you think about instant payments, I think just up there, you tend to think about me paying £20 to or €20 to my kid because he's standing at a shop and he needs the money. But actually, it could be 200 million euros being transferred by a corporate treasurer. And I guess there is a distinction between how long you might want to think before you allow the €20 versus the 200 million euros to be released. Tom, when you were giving your overview of your experience, the one thing that really jumps out amongst everything for me is that experience that you had in helping to design Target 2. I mean, that's such a big change to the infrastructures across Europe. And that was in a slightly different world. It was when we moved into an RTGS. What lessons that you learned from that experience then do you think still apply today as people are getting used to, as we've just been talking about, the rollout of instant payment infrastructures? What are the lessons that are common to real-time rails that you picked up in the past?
Yeah, I mean, when we released Target 2 with the new functionalities, real-time functionalities, one thing that I remember that has been really welcome from the European financial institution has been the A2A implementation. So the Treasury control room with the today we call API, so literally an interaction between the legacy system of the Treasury and the Target 2 in order to be sure that they were in real time and not mirroring situation. But of course, things are changing, because at the time tips, I don't think it was in the roadmap. And the only things that was real time was, but it came later on, Target 2 securities, but literally in the clearing and settlement side, because finally there were the CSM that it was running on the operational side of the securities. And so I don't think, I know, because I'm still involved with the European Central Bank as an observer, that the concept and the new Target 2 that now is undergoing in terms of the project is thinking about the real-time process. And I have to say that one of the issues I still like to say we, because I'm involved, is also the pricing. So one thing that is important is not only providing new functionalities. It is what, to be honest, Target 2 is thinking. And all information are available in the ECB website. But think about the fact that the regulator is telling financial institutions that they should offer the real-time payments free or cheaper than the traditional credit transfer, thinking about all implementation need to be done. So, I mean, we need to think about literally the cost of the investment and what the European Central Bank is doing. But it's not only the European Central Bank. Every central bank is doing a lot of implementation to thinking about how our world is changing. And here, I mean, we can talk about many other things like the digital currency and why we are talking about new projects. And but yes, so the point is exactly this. Systems are changing, are aware that we are not, like you correctly said, we are not talking about 20 years ago, but the cost of the implementation is still very high because it's not a matter of black box or the payment solution that you deploy in your system up and running and you have innovation. It's not like that. It's a process that require expertise and experts and people that are able to analyze the business in the financial institution they are representing. It is the only way to have a strong foundation to build the new era of payments or managing the liquidity that, as we said, they are deeply connected, strictly connected.
And I'm conscious we're coming to the end. I'm just going to throw out a topic that we have. Just give me 30 seconds on. We haven't got much longer, but it's interesting if some of the comments that have come through sort of fit into here, which is bringing the moving into a more digital world. So you touched on a couple of times earlier about digital currencies, whether it's CBDCs or whether we're talking stable coins or even cryptos or other forms of digital assets. And some of the questions in the chat are around identities and cybersecurity, and all of this is moving to as everything gets faster and faster and faster. When we talk real-time rails, we're not just talking about real-time cash settlement. We've got all of these other forms of assets. How is that going to change the world of liquidity? And where do some of the other challenges along there about, well, if everything's changing instantly, can we actually verify people's identities instantly and so on? I'm not even sure what the question is in there, Dom. I'll just ask you to comment on how the world may change even more than it feels today if we were having this conversation in April 2027.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's amazing. And like you now, I'm reading some comments and you spot on. I mean, let's start. And again, I'd like to give some ideas for the audience that is listening to us to be explored more. And will be, of course, the opportunity. CBDC and the digital euro or digital currency is not a central bank idea. It's coming from the G20. Why? The G20 directive is something that has been written to mitigate the fragmentation. So increase interoperability between different governments all over the world. Now, I don't think that CBDC in general is in a good shape so far because there are several projects, but they are still fragmented. So central banks are not talking to each other. Plus, there are other geopolitical issues that I don't think that we have the time to talk right now, but I think that you are aware about. And so why the central bank is interested in developing a digital currency solution? Because when we talk about digital currency or, like you said, other systems that are moving liquidity in the digital currency in general, all of them are going outside of the central bank jurisdiction. So the central bank is losing the flow of the economy of the country. And of course, it's not safe in terms of the protection the regulator is putting into place to protect the central bank money jurisdiction. So this is why the CBDC is absolutely a success. There are pilot phases that are in place right now, but the most important thing is interoperability. So I can see a CBDC or a digital currency based on stable coin. So I'm not talking about volatile and things like that and are not really related to the topic we are discussing today, but interoperability will be a must. And I invite whoever is involved in a pilot exercise to invest in the interoperability, because it's the one that is going to kill all closed as a group, mitigate all risk coming from geopolitical issues that we are having today. That is the one that is going also to unlock all business at the level of the cross payments, making payments and the business safer.
And I think, look, we've hit time, so we're going to have to call it quits. I think we may have just identified a potential next topic area for one of these podcasts, because there's a huge amount we could talk about as we start to bring in those new forms of settlement. But we have run out of time now. So thanks very much, Dom, for joining us today, sharing your views. It's been really good. If anyone's got any more questions after the event, please ask them. We'll answer them for you later. So this concludes our latest Liquidity Talks live stream and podcast. We'll be putting the podcast out on LinkedIn, Spotify, Apple Music, and other media outlets and streaming services very soon. Thanks very much for joining us today. Look out for our next podcast. My name's Pete McIntyre, not Nova Roberts today. Thanks for tuning in and goodbye. You've been listening to Liquidity Talks. Don't forget to subscribe to stay updated on the latest developments and industry opinion from the world of treasury, liquidity, and risk.
Thank you. Thank you.
You've been listening to Liquidity Talks. Don't forget to subscribe to stay updated on the latest developments and industry opinion from the world of treasury, liquidity, and risk.